Hello, everyone. I hope you've had a great experience with our forum so far. This next session, U.S. Science and Technology on the Front Lines, brings together leaders in science and technology to take a clear-eyed look at efforts to equip our nation with the S&T capabilities needed to out-innovate existential threats and stay globally competitive. Our moderator today is Research America board member, Dr. Sudip Parikh, Chief Executive Officer for the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And our panelists are Dr. Sethuraman, Panchanathan, Director of the National Science Foundation, Research America board member, Dr. Mikael Dolsten, Chief Scientific Officer and Worldwide Research, Development, and Medical at Pfizer, Dr. Kaye Fealing, Dean at Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and Dr. Marcia McNutt, President of the National Academy of Sciences. Now, all of the bios for our speakers can be found in the toolbar at the bottom of the virtual environment pages. And with that, Sudip, it's my pleasure to turn things over to you.
Thank you, Donna, and good afternoon, everybody. Well, I hope you're as excited as I am about this session, because I've been excited about it ever since I found out I had the privilege of moderating a few weeks ago. It seems really strange to say it during a pandemic, but we are living in scientifically amazing times, right? The pace of discovery and innovation has never been faster. I keep talking about how we've seen the methane-covered mountains of Pluto. Well, that was like 3 years ago. We've discovered gravitational ripples caused by colliding black holes. We've detailed extensive changes to our climate and environment. We've advanced AI and quantum computing to the brink of broader utility. This audience certainly knows that we've harnessed gene editing to potentially cure, and I said cure, diseases like sickle cell anemia and thalassemia and others. But despite failures in our public health response to the pandemic, the biomedical research enterprise has never worked more quickly. Science has been essential to solving this complex societal challenge. But these achievements are lagging indicators of our past investments in science and technology. There are all kinds of comments, including from my parents, about the overnight success of mRNA vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer. But we all know that there's a 20-year story behind this overnight success. And it's illustrative of why investing in science and technology is critical to the future. The vaccines had many key contributors in government, academia, and industry. And here's what I'd like to add, and that's the US Congress. If you'll recall, the US Congress doubled the NIH budget from 1998 to 2003, and then added a $10 billion stimulus in 2009 and 10. Those were key times when funding was flowing to higher risk research. And research funded by DARPA and by the National Science Foundation and by philanthropies and industry have all played critical roles during the pandemic. Seminal pieces of research went relatively unnoticed at the time, but have been so important. It's clear that the vaccines are a product of our previous investment in research, and they're a lagging indicator of that investment, and they're an embodiment of those wondrous times I was talking about. But we also live in uncertain times. Multiple intersecting challenges have the potential to become the next global crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic is not going to be the last time that science is going to be called upon to mitigate an existential threat. Addressing other public health concerns such as Alzheimer's, climate change, food and water insecurity, and other challenges, many of which are yet to even emerge, in addition to ensuring our economic vitality, good jobs, that's all going to require new investments in science and technology. So make no mistake, we're in two high-stakes global competitions that Donna mentioned. First, we're racing China, India, Europe, our friends and not our friends, to discover and translate scientific advances into products and services that make us healthier, provide good jobs, and build our future economy. Second, we're in a race against time to make the discoveries, invent the technologies, and develop the practices to mitigate upcoming crises. Now, Congress has seen this urgency and focused attention on science in a way that hasn't been seen in a generation. Bipartisan authorizing legislation has passed both the House and the Senate. large increases for research are on the table during the appropriations process this year. And the energy in the private sector and within philanthropies is high. But we're at a fork in the road. The policy decisions to authorize those increases in investment and to ensure that those appropriations happen, they're all going to happen by the end of 2021, or they won't happen for a long time. There aren't do-overs in this. Our bipartisan supporters in Congress and the leaders who've done this, they're not going to be able to do this again next year. Can't just repeat what's on the table. And so there's a lot to both look at in terms of policy in what's in front of Congress right now, and a lot to give energy to. And the group of people that we've assembled today know more about this than anybody. And so I'm really excited to stop talking now and to bring them into the conversation, because they're gonna highlight all the pieces of this biomedical enterprise that come together and the research enterprise that come together, and highlight why those policy decisions that are standing in front of Congress right now are ones that we as a community have got to ensure get through, because this is a once in a generation opportunity. So let me start the conversation. Now, you all heard everyone's titles as we came into the conversation. So I'm going to dispense with the introductions. Go to the website to learn more about these amazing people. I'm even going to dispense with our titles. We're going to have a conversation here, and if I can speak over these sirens outside, then we'll have a great back and forth conversation. I'm going to turn to Kaye first. Kaye has been Fealing. Kaye, you're an economist, which at this table here at Research America is not. We don't have too many economists sitting around the table. It's important to have your view here. You're an economist who's looked at this enterprise. How do you view the role of the federal government in funding S&T, and how does it interplay with universities and industry? And why is it important that as a share of GDP, it's important that we have a large share of that GDP going to research and development?
Well, Sudip, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. And in your introduction, you mentioned health, jobs, talent, how important investments in research and development are in terms of solving problems regarding our human condition, in even discovering some of what those issues are that we need to apply our talents to. So I just want to pick up from there and say, in answer to your question about why even look at what proportion of our gross national or gross domestic product do we use for research and development, I have three things that I want to put on the table, because there are a lot of other folks on this call that can also bring attention to the answer to your question. The first is, we're thinking about curiosity-driven or discovery research. We're also talking about use-inspired basic research and development. And we know, as you said, the private sector has a part to play, philanthropic institutions have a part to play, but the federal government has a huge part to play here. And therefore, looking at this simple ratio, R&D to GDP, research and development divided by gross domestic product, it's just an indicator of the amount of attention and activity we're paying to these important aspects of our innovation system. And so at the first blush, it's really important to understand that these advances and investments in advances in our discovery and solution processes, that is what's picked up to some degree by this indicator. Now, that doesn't mean that only the federal funding matters. It certainly is a basis for a lot of activity that occurs even in industry and with the support of philanthropic institutions. So it's at the core. And again, we're looking at solving major issues here and also discovering what the genesis of those problems are that affect our human condition. What do I mean by that? Issues pertaining to health, as you said, security, and usually we think of national security, but we're also talking about food security and water security. We're talking about environmental quality, and we're talking about all of these elements and more for all of us here in the United States and around the world. The second item I would put on the table is talent. Why do we care about how much we're spending on research and development within our economy? And that's because some of it actually goes to our talent. I'm sitting here at a university at Georgia Tech, and I see those investments all the time. I was actually on a phone call with students this morning about not just these investments. They don't necessarily see that distinction, but boy, when you hear about what they're doing, the productivity that's coming from the students and the talent that's being grown, that's an important aspect of these federal investments in R&D. So that's another piece that's really important. Investments in our education, that's important to continued growth, not just starting things up or standing up new programs or new exploration areas of exploration, but it's also really important for continued growth. We're talking about STEM education. We're talking about traineeships. We're talking about investments in not just Research Ones, but Research 2 universities, developing centers of excellence in subfields that are linked to existing strengths in a strategy for maximizing both outstanding work and assuring its broader geographical distribution all across the United States. The only other thing I will add for now is that all of this requires us to be able to know at the end of the day, how did we do? What was the impact? Did we really discover new things and also apply our talents to understanding and developing new solutions? And I think that part of that is also the investment in the data infrastructure to, at the end of the day, know how did we do? So in summary, I want to say we want to remain on the leading edge of technological innovation. To do so, we need government investments in areas that A, give a major return to the public, and B, are risky enough that the private sector does not necessarily see initially that value in that investment. Thank you, Sudip. Back to you.
That's great, Kaye. And thanks for that big picture assessment. I'm going to turn now to Panch. Panch, you are leading the National Science Foundation, which is the recipient of many of the funds that we just talked about in terms of government investment. Now, in the past, let's say 20 years ago, this is the National Health Research Forum. We may not have invited the National Science Foundation director to this particular party, but you're here because actually there's an incredible connection between the work that NSF does and health and well-being. I'm going to turn it over to you to expand upon what Kaye was telling us, and how does NSF fit into this picture?
No, thank you so much again, Sudip, for inviting us. You are absolutely correct, and Kaye made some fantastic remarks here. I'll just follow up and say that NSF has been a tremendous resource to the nation. If you look at the genesis of NSF, when Iver Bush in 1945, when he set forth the vision for what NSF can do, and then it was launched 70 years ago, 70 plus years ago, in 1950. If you look at even this moment of COVID, for example, if you look at the PCR test, or if you look at the CRISPR technology, all of that is coming to very handy in this moment of very important moment of rapid detection of COVID, for example. This is not just happenstance. It doesn't just happen, even within a decade in terms of research explorations. These are several decades of what Kaye alluded to, which is what I call curiosity-driven, discovery-based explorations or exploratory research. Now, these explorations then sometimes take within a decade, maybe even a few years, to translate into very valuable outcomes and outputs. Sometimes it takes several decades. So this intertwining of curiosity-driven, discovery-based explorations and use-inspired, solutions-focused innovations, that is the DNA of NSF. That's how I characterize it. Highly synergistic, highly symbiotic, and NSF has been at it. And even take, for example, the 3D printing technology. Even undergraduate students, expressing their unbelievable innovative potential by using that to print rapid PPE equipment. This started in 1980s as an additive manufacturing kind of a focus that NSF put in place. So over the several decades, my predecessors and the fantastic folks at NSF and the scientific community has made possible these tremendous innovations that have been put in place. And this is exceedingly important. Now, at this moment, therefore, these are coming to assist in terms of solving the problem at hand in a timely manner. And so I'm thrilled by that. You talked about the health focus. Let us be very clear that NSF has tremendous amount of work that it does in terms of health. the basic biology, all the way up to engineering, computing, and let's not forget the most important of it all at this moment is the social behavioral sciences. This is an exceedingly important thing that people need to understand, that intertwining and the fabric and the thread of social behavioral sciences has shown how important it is in trying to find real solutions to today's challenges, including, how do we get people to, vaccinate themselves? All of these are important things at hand right now. And what NSF has been doing is spearheading research at the confluence of all of these areas that are exceedingly vital. Now, I don't want to take all the time because I want my colleagues to be able to reflect on this, but I will come back and talk about the importance of partnerships here. So when you talk about health, health is not just an NIH realm only, as important and as exciting as they are in terms of what the contributions have been, but health is also in the realm of what NSF does, or Department of Energy does, or even NASA does and others, because all of this through partnerships can do unbelievable, amazing things for the future of the health, well-being, economic well-being, and societal prosperity. So we'll come back and talk about this. The other important thing I will make sure I come back and talk about is about talent. And Kaye made an excellent point there. Talent and the geography of innovation are exceedingly important imperatives at this moment. Sudip, you know this better than anybody else. You and I talk about this all the time. And so I look forward to talking about those things too. So over to you, Sudip.
Thanks, Panch. Yeah, I can't wait to come back to those topics. Right now, I'm going to turn from the NSF director to Mikael. Mikael is here coming from Pfizer. So now we're talking about industry. Now, Mikael, you serve on the Research America board, which means that you care about policy and funding at the federal level for biomedical research. Make that connection for us. Why are you interested in biomedical research being funded and all federal research being funded? What's the connection?
Yeah, thank you so much. For us, it's so important to keep a vibrant, vital scientific ecosystem that can thrive and do remarkable progress. And the ecosystem will not be stronger than the strengths of each of its components. And there are many contributors. Maybe the most prominent are academia, medical centers, federal agencies, biotech pharmaceutical companies, and philanthropic groups. So for us to ensure rapid medical advances and to make United States a competitive place with opportunities for talents to contribute, we think it's so important to keep that ecosystem very close, interactive. Now, we were able to play a prominent role in the COVID pandemic on one part because of our long history in discovering, developing, and providing large number of vaccines to the world. And in another part, because we were pioneering with our colleagues BioNTech, a new technology, mRNA, that played such a fundamental role in taking on this challenge to rapidly design a vaccine and to demonstrate in 8 months that you had a product that, when reviewed by regulators across the globe, was viewed as safe and effective in preventing infection, preventing illness, and ensuring that we kept people safe from emergency rooms progressing into intensive care units and potential risk for dying. So that was an amazing journey to be part, and I wanted to acknowledge everyone in the ecosystem that played a unique role in making this possible. But we can't now get complacent. We have made some very important inroads into this difficult challenge with the vaccine. But for us, it's just the first set, to use an analogy to the US Open. It's not over until the game is over and the audience can safely return home. And we need to consider, some colleagues touch upon that, how do we provide a scientific communication and social engagement of the unvaccinated in the United States? How do we ensure that the vaccinated stay safe? That may mean that many of them in proper time will need boosts, and how do we provide the data that allow people and their medical advisors to take those decisions? And of course, how can we, as a manufacturing organization, make sure that the globe as a whole can get the contribution of this amazing American innovation? So that's very much why we feel it's so important. This success in breakthrough of the last 100 years that we've seen in the struggle with this pandemic, the opportunity for America to be at the forefront of the future, it does not happen in isolation. We need to create that dialogue over the boundaries. And that's why we are so heavily involved. And that's why I am, as a physician and scientist, find it my duty to serve patients through bringing together people around the table of science.
Thanks, Michael. No, I truly appreciate that. You know, I often think about, 20 years ago, some of the seminal work related to the mRNA vaccines you were talking about, and 10 years ago, that work was happening. Somewhere in the world right now, somebody's doing seminal work that's going to help us for the next crisis, and I hope it's here as opposed to somewhere else. I'm going to turn to Marcia now. Marcia is coming to us as president of the National Academy of Sciences, which is the organization that represents all the best scientists in the country, most accomplished scientists in the country. Marcia, you and Kaye and I are all serving on something called the Science and Technology Action Committee, where we've put forth a plan that is really about building on the foundations, making the investments today so that we can hopefully have those products and processes and plans to mitigate whatever comes. You have been serving for a long time at places that require this interdisciplinary research to tackle challenging problems. What do you see in terms of the environmental crises that may be confronting us and the need for interdisciplinary research there, and how some of the suggestions that we made in the Science and Technology Action Plan help us get ready for those?
Sure, Sudip, thanks for that question. So we've seen this practically unending and ever increasing string of environmental disasters, some of them man-made, like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, some of them indirectly man-made through climate change exacerbating the frequency and intensity of natural disasters such as wildfires, floods, hurricanes, droughts. It's gotten to the situation where we aren't going to be able to solve this if we cannot work together across different disciplines. So let me give you a good example from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The oil spill began as an industrial accident due to failures in decision-making and failures in engineering. That quickly became an environmental catastrophe. That environmental catastrophe then cascaded into human health. It cascaded into the economy, and it cascaded into the well-being of everyone in the Gulf region. One fact I remember hearing back during Deepwater Horizon was that 9 out of every 10 jobs in the Gulf region depended on the environment, because it was tourism, fishing, etc., all the kinds of jobs that were being horribly hurt by the oil spill. But 9 out of every $10 in the Gulf region came from extraction of oil. And so you had this huge problem in the Gulf that what money was saying was not what jobs were saying. And this is why you need to bring in environmental scientists, health researchers, engineers, social scientists, including economists, and political leaders who are going to work together to find those win-win solutions for everyone. And we have to play that out again and again. We have to play it out in COVID. We have to play it out with climate change. We have to play it out with all the other problems we're facing right now if we hope to solve it. And unfortunately, our traditions in academia are very siloed. We're siloed into a health school and a school of engineering and a school of science and departments that don't train students to talk to each other and that don't work together. And I think we've got a new opportunity right now to break down those silos and really address the problems of our time.
Thanks, Marcia. That's it's great to sort of zoom out a bit and think beyond the current crisis and realize that cadence of crises is just increasing, and it's not our imaginations. It's a real thing. All of you touched upon the importance of talent, human capital to these efforts, and when we as a community advocate for more funding, we have to be careful not to just have it be more funding, but about what we're using that funding for. And I know that each of you in your own way has been a proponent of the human capital. And you actually, as I look through writings of you all, you have different catchphrases for how you talk about these. So I'm gonna go to Panch first because he's got one that has some alliteration to it, or is that consonants? I can never remember. I'm not an English major. Panch, talk about the missing millions and why we need scientists from all over the country involved.
Absolutely, Sudip. Let's start with the good news here. We have tremendous untapped talent all across the geography of our great nation. And therefore, it's very incumbent upon us to make sure that every domestic talent that is available in every corner of our nation has the opportunity to be motivated, to be inspired, to be nurtured, and brought to life. It is our responsibility in working with partnerships. When Marcia was talking about partnerships, in terms of everything coming together, government, public, private enterprises, all of us working together in order to take grand challenge problems that Marcia talked about in terms of examples of grand challenge beautifully. So this is a grand challenge of our time, which is, can we take all the talent that we have, the domestic talent that we have in our nation, and be able to bring it to full fruition so that they might contribute to solving the grand challenges of our time and of the future. I have seen firsthand in the institution that I used to work at in Arizona State University, where I have seen unbelievable broad socioeconomic demographic of talent and the geographical diversity of talent that was attracted to the institution. And I will tell you that these students are amazing. In fact, I would even argue with all of you that unless you have gone through real challenges as you have gone through your K-12 experience, in terms of the difficulties that students face, in terms of family income issues, or in terms of other kinds of challenges students face, they build a lot of grit. They build a lot of context. They build a lot of innovation through which they exercise their talent in ways that they try to come out of it. And therefore, it is our responsibility as a nation, and I take it as a responsibility of what NSF can do, to see what we can do to give these unbelievable, talented folks the chance to have their dreams realized through community college education, through four-year college education, through university education, and beyond in terms of preparing them for the jobs of the future, but also they are the entrepreneurs of the future. These are people who are taking risks every day. Who better can create the entrepreneurial enterprises that really express the risk-taking mindset than the folks that are taking risks every day of their lives? And therefore, they have it in them, the grit, the entrepreneurial mindset, and therefore it is upon us to give the opportunity for every one of the talent to manifest itself. And I strongly believe, and I can say this because I was a global talent that was attracted to come to the United States, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that have been given. The fabric of meritocracy, the fabric of democracy, the fabric of innovation that permeates every aspect of this nation has inspired me. And I feel a sort of sense of duty to give back, to make sure that we have every bit of talent, domestic talent, to be inspired, and then augmented with every bit of global talent that we can attract to this great nation, so that the combined force, the full force of domestic and global talent, I can tell you, it will keep us in the vanguard of innovation for centuries to come, if we only put our hearts, minds, and souls in solving this missing millions of talent that need to be given that opportunity and challenge, and how do we nurture them. So we're going to be working hard at it, and we know that this is not just NSF. This is NSF working with all the agencies, industry, even within NSF, breaking down the barriers that Marcia very nicely talked about in academia. How do we make sure that we break down the barriers and work together, working with foundations, working with international partners, you name it, cities, K-12 systems, community colleges, universities, all of them. It takes a village. It takes a village to solve this problem at its scale. And I'm confident that we will do it as a nation, because we are, after all, an innovative nation. So thank you, Sudip, and I'm happy to come back and weigh in on any specific thread of it after my fellow panelists have had a chance to weigh in.
Thanks, Panch. I'm going to turn to Kaye next. Kaye, you've served on some of the advisory committees to the NSF on some of these issues. And, when we look at this, the way I look at it is, gosh, we can't only have scientists coming from the East and West Coast if we're going to be competing with countries around the world, demographic behemoths that are graduating just incredible numbers of scientists and engineers. We've got to also have scientists from the Mississippi Delta and Appalachia and everywhere else across the country. Kaye, what are some of the concrete programs I know you've advised on at NSF to make this happen?
So I thought that exactly what Panch said is 100%, covered it. Let me just give a couple of examples. First, I am on the NSF CIOS committee, that is the Committee on Equal Opportunity in Science and Engineering. And the focus there is really to see advances in science be inclusive, right? It's in the name. The report that came out a year ago was on diverse community voices. And the whole point there was that in our educational portfolio and our research portfolio, we need to be sure to take in what is really the problem set that diverse communities are dealing with in a given time frame. That can actually add to and advance our science. So it's not just that we sit in one, ivory tower or a lab or something like that and try to figure things out. That's obviously an important contribution. We also can, and it's an also can understand from our surroundings, from a variety of different communities, what are some of the issues that we really need to reflect on and work on in our institutions, and work on in our, as I said before, Research One or community colleges, as Panch said. It's so important to have that ability. The other advisory committee that I'm on is Education and Human Resources. And there we see not just attention on K-12 and also higher education, but we also see in a different way attention to minority serving institutions, including tribal colleges. And looking for ingenuity, as Panch said, we can find our next entrepreneurs in many places. So looking not only for the problem set, but for the ingenuity in a variety of places. So I'm very fortunate to feel that here within a university structure, we are using in so many respects, those investments to their utmost. We also need to make sure that we are also using our investments in science and technology to have inclusive communities within our sphere, but also to include those diverse community voices. The last thing I'll say, as you said at the beginning, I'm an economist. In 2000, this is another data set actually that comes out of the National Science Foundation, the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics. In 2018, the number of minority African-American PhDs minted in 2018, 21. If you go back maybe a decade or so, you still get 15 or 21. I also happen to have an undergrad degree in math. So if you look at this 2018, the number of math PhDs minted, in African-American math PhDs minted, 31. We can do better in terms of these investments in and inclusion of more individuals from a variety of different communities in our science and engineering ecosystem, as someone said earlier. So I just wanted to bring out those few things. The CIOS report on diverse community voices, the activities that are funded K-12 and higher education that really spans a variety of communities in STEM education especially, and also just really think through the small n, the missing, I call it small n, Panch calls it missing millions. And we really have to get after that number and try to understand how we could do better.
Yeah, thanks, Kaye. Just those numbers are mind-boggling, right? Out of all the PhDs in America, to have less than, of a couple dozen African Americans makes very little sense in the globally competitive environment that we're in. I always like to say that highlighting the previously hidden in no way diminishes the already admired. We can do all these things at once, including foreign talent. Marcia, I'm going to turn to you next. The Academies has really done a great job of highlighting our successful scientists, but also in advocating for broadening the sciences, also to make them interdisciplinary. There's even a question in the chat right now directly aimed at you, Marcia, about are transdisciplinary scientists valuable in a way that they should be? Have you found them valuable on these transdisciplinary teams? Tell us about the Academy's work and whether or not those transdisciplinary scientists are valuable to those teams.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Sudip, but I've got so much to say on this topic. I'm just going to really try to push to get it all in.
Yep.
First of all, I agree completely with Kaye and Panch about the fact that we are doing a horrible job of nurturing our own homegrown talent. You all know from your kids' soccer teams that if the soccer team draws from your neighborhood, it's so-so. If it draws from the entire city or the entire state, it's really, really good. And we're essentially playing neighborhood soccer right now in terms of how we're training the best and brightest to really contribute to what is a huge need for talent. Second thing I want to say is we're in an international competition for talent. It used to be that we could count on the best and brightest to come here to the US to study, and we would keep the very best of them. So we were like the World Series of science. And now too many of those scientists are finding great opportunities in their native countries and either don't want to come here to study or don't want to stay here. And again, we aren't going to be the World Series champs if we can't continue to draw from the best and brightest everywhere. And then finally, this thing about how we're training people. I think the US actually has a chance right now to be a leader in training students so that they can move gracefully wherever the problems are, so that they take a problem focus rather than a disciplinary focus. And my own view on this is that it comes down to vocabulary. You learn more new words in first-year biology than you do in first-year Spanish. And unfortunately, we are training monolinguists right now in science. And we need to train people who have a good understanding of the terminology and the way to problem solve across fields if they're actually going to address these big issues of our day. So I'll stop there.
Marcia, you're right. You have incredible things to say. One of the things that you touched on that is a question in the chat is the global talent acquisition. Are we still interested as a country? I think you just heard Marcia say we very much are. I just testified to Congress a couple months ago on the same issue, saying absolutely we are. I know Panch is shaking his head yes. Michael, I'm going to turn to you on this issue of talent. Pfizer is an American company, but it's a global entity, and you draw people from everywhere. What does this mean to have scientists and engineers and mathematicians trained well in the United States and staying in the United States? What does it mean for our competitiveness, and what does it mean for Pfizer?
You know, I think this talent pool that is eager to contribute, whether in the public or private sector, is a foundation for maintaining an American innovation industry. And I think Marcia said it so well. It is an and not an or. It's not sufficient just to have great talents coming from, and you know, a lot of the top talents in US come from a rather narrow number of universities. You probably could count them on your two hands fingers, possibly taking help of one foot toes. But we need to blend that, and it's not just because there happen to be good scientists in the rest of the 6.5 billion people around the globe, but people come with different perspectives, different ideas, and diversity is so important in science. Within the United States, to ensure incentives for many young people to go into science and to do it with a diverse plan, but the same outside United States. So I do worry a bit that we don't spend enough thinking about this. And, you know, one part when I heard my colleagues saying there isn't the same magic about coming to United States, we still have some of the best places where you can mingle, whether virtually or hopefully one day more safely physically. But I think we need to invest more in understanding what does it take to create an innovation culture of the country. What does it take to create a social fabric that wants others to come? And I think we need to, be willing to ask the difficult questions, not just put the arm on the chest and saying we are great, but really look at the things we do not as great here and show that we're willing to reflect and learn and do things in a new way. Because currently, I think a lot of people remotely look at United States and do not completely recognize it as the very welcoming, warm place it has used to be. But I do think there is an opportunity now to dial up that positive aspect of United States if we're willing to ask the hard questions while celebrating what we do well at the same time.
That's really powerful, Michael. And you talk about doing things differently coming, and I mentioned at the outset that there are these pieces of legislation that are making their way through Congress. And one of the goals here is right now we're spending about 0.7% of GDP on research and investment, on research and development. And in the 1960s, it was up around 1.9%. President Biden has suggested a goal of around 2% of GDP. And Kaye talked about at the beginning that these numbers mean something. They're important because we can take some of that and actually invest it in people, and also in different ways of funding science. So I'm going to turn back to Panch here. Panch, some of these biggest pieces of legislation involve the NSF for the Futures Act, USICA, and part of what they suggest is a new directorate at the NSF that maybe changes some of the risk portfolio. We have some risks, some things that are incremental, some things that are high risk, high reward. Panch, tell us about those and sort of what some of those ideas are in this new way of thinking that might be making its way through Congress.
Thank you very much, Sudip. Again, I mean, if you look at this, the previous conceptualization I was talking about, this twin objective, curiosity-driven, as well as use-inspired, working together, highly synergistic, highly symbiotic. One of the things that NSF does very well is this symbiosis that it brings together between science and technology, both being made possible to happen. NSF is known for its fantastic curiosity-driven, discovery-based research for several decades. But what is not known much about NSF, not at the same scale as the curiosity-driven research, is it also makes possible use-inspired solutions-focused activities. But so the synergy that is there is extremely important to exploit, explore, energize, leverage, whatever term that you want to use, so that you're investing in both these aspects, so they can both coexist together and mutually reinforce each other. In other words, a curiosity-driven research makes possible tremendous innovation outcomes. So does innovative research, translational research, makes possible more curiosity-driven research. And so this back and forth is what is the richness of how we can ensure prosperity from an economic as well as a societal term. When Marcia was talking about problem-driven innovations is as important as curiosity-driven innovations. So both of them have to work together, hand in hand. So this technology directorate that you talk about, Sudip, is something that I call it the Technology Innovation Partnership Directorate, or the TIP Directorate, intentionally to tip the balance, if you may, or tip the scale, if you may. So it is a cross-cutting directorate. A cross-cutting directorate that essentially leverages what's happening in the directorates of computer information sciences and engineering, or bio, or geo, or social behavioral sciences, mathematical, physical sciences, education, human resources, and others, but also energizes them in turn. Let me give you a concrete example. If you take AI, for example, AI today that we are celebrating and we are leveraging all of AI's capabilities is because of the 7 decades of investments that have been made in AI. Let's not forget that in AI, not only by NSF, but by other agencies too. So now is the time. What we're doing is, if you look at the AI institutes that were launched by NSF last year and this year, the 7 of them in the first year, and then the other 11 of them in just a few weeks ago, the 18 institutes, they encompass right now about 41 states of our great nation, right? AI is everywhere and should be everywhere. Talent that can be inspired by AI is everywhere. Problems that can be solved by AI is everywhere. And therefore, these institutes bring together through partnerships the ability to be able to solve problems, even identify problems, and therefore solve problems in innovative ways. And at the same time, the talent, the skill set, and the ideas being nurtured because of that process. So this AI, for example, is a good example of how you look at what is happening from the fundamental core research perspective, as well as how do you bring that, the core research to translational outcomes, and the translational outcomes back, energizing more research. Let me give you a concrete example on that one. Now we are facing in AI privacy, security, bias, ethics. We talk about a lot of things. Those things imply to you 2 things. One is that you can now go back and look at more exploratory research to solve those basic problems. But even more importantly, it tells you that social behavioral sciences, and again, underscore the point, social behavioral sciences have to work together in symbiosis with the other directorates, not after the fact, but even in the design of solutions, design of technology, design of some of the fundamental innovations. It's become the fabric of how you proceed forward. So I therefore am excited about, if you can't figure it out from my tonality and energy, I'm sorry, I lack in some of that. But this cross-cutting directorate, therefore, would make possible that energization and leveraging. And you talked about something very important, Sudip. What we are working on right now is not only the industries of tomorrow, AI, quantum, and advanced wireless, and so on, but also we're working on the future of the industries of tomorrow. What is that industry? What is that AI in 2050 that we are nurturing today that's going to manifest it because of this rich symbiosis? And so I'm truly enthused by this investment, grateful to the bipartisan support in Congress, grateful to the Biden-Harris administration for the tremendous commitment to science, technology, innovation, and therefore prosperity. So we are looking forward to that, and we're looking forward to NSF being a vehicle in partnership with other agencies and industry and other partners to deliver the goods for our citizens through high-paying jobs, through innovative spheres of excellence everywhere across the geographies of our nation, and also to ensure that every talent is given its opportunity to manifest itself to the fullest extent possible.
Panch, you just gave a great call for why we need to make sure over this next 4 months we get these pieces of legislation passed. Marcia, I'm going to turn to you. Panch talked about the new directorate at NSF, but there are these sort of differences in risk portfolio throughout the the federal investment that are coming into play? ARPA-H, ARPA-E, DARPA, the directorate. What are your thoughts about that as new things to be done with some of this newly authorized funding? And what else should we be doing?
So I definitely look at research as the same way anyone needs to look at their investment portfolio. You need to have a range of risk within your portfolio. You need to have targeted funds that match with your needs and your values. And then you also need to have some blue sky stuff that you just continue to fund investigations which may seem mundane right now, but it might be someone writing about and studying a certain bacterium that seems to be in the backwaters of science, but later becomes the tool for CRISPR-Cas9. There are so many examples of how a great nation like the US can actually afford to have a diverse portfolio, and it is exactly that that's going to make us great.
That makes so much sense. And Michael, when we do it right, we partner with industry. Is that, do you see those bonds being more possible when there's just more funding at the table?
Absolutely. I think the key to create a system of innovation is to have that vibrant discussion. And I love this idea of a portfolio on different types of mature science and on different technologies. But I think you only leverage such a portfolio if you have a strategic plan. If you have, academic centers working in isolation on one piece, in one pocket, you have informatics-oriented company working in a completely different sector, and then you have life science working separately. The efficiency of this system is going to be disappointing for patients that needs new medical solution, or for the American people, and it will be maybe other nations then that will benefit from what we publish. So that's really what I think is the at-risk missed opportunity. We need to create that integrated strategic plan where we can quickly translate the unexpected, the probable, and the unimaginable into breakthroughs that can be coming our nation to benefit, coming Americans and the globe to benefit. Sometimes that needs to be in certain regions of the world, but increasingly it can be virtual regions.
Michael, that makes so much sense. You know, it's this idea that we can actually deliver on a portfolio by having a plan. Plan beats no plan many times, most of the time. And one of the recommendations from the Science and Technology Action Committee, again, that Marcia and Kaye and I have served on, is for there to be a national plan and coordination with industry, with philanthropy, with government, with academia, on especially the tough problems. You're not going to solve the big problems without a plan. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn to, there's a couple questions in the chat that I think are really relevant. One is a question near and dear to my heart. Punch, I was an NSF graduate research fellow a long time ago, and there's a question in the chat here saying, what role can increasing graduate fellowships play in increasing the domestic talent workforce by increasing those incentives and being more competitive with private industry for top talent?
Absolutely, very important. In fact, if you're talking to my colleagues, they will tell you, even as recent as a couple of days ago, I've been emphasizing the importance of rapidly scaling the graduate research fellowship program so that we might be able to attract the unbelievable talent that is ready to engage in graduate research. But sometimes we probably miss them because we don't have enough of them, and they get attracted to things, nothing wrong, to going into taking jobs in industry, which is a very good thing. But if they have the aspiration to want to pursue a graduate program and then do even better things for industry or become an entrepreneur or even go into academia, that we not miss that talent and nurturing that talent. So we are very committed at NSF to see how we might expand the graduate research fellowship program, but this also has to be done in partnership. So this is where, to the earlier point that you made with Michael, which I thought was Michael gave an excellent response, is how might industry partnerships also be leveraged to make sure that the graduate research fellowship program, to Marcia's point, having a portfolio of thinking, even in graduate research fellowship thinking, that some of the graduate research fellows will be in the curiosity-driven research space. Some will be in the fusion of how the curiosity-driven research and industry-oriented problems being worked on, and graduate research fellows even having the possibility of co-mentorship between industry researchers and academic researchers. How can we build graduate research fellowship programs that also make possible that? How can we build graduate research fellowship programs which are more like entrepreneurial fellowship programs, right? That people who have the natural inclination to want to try something, take high risks and do something significant, give them the opportunity to do that. So the multiple facets of these graduate research fellowships have to be explored, and keeping in mind the geographies, keeping in mind every part of the nation, all 50 states, rural and urban, all of them across our great nation matters in terms of ensuring the talent is given the opportunity. So we have to keep all of that in mind as we think about graduate research fellowships of the future.
That's great, Panch. Panch, when I had mine in 1996, I think there were 800 across the country. How many are there today?
Sorry, I muted myself. It's 2,000 right now. 2,000. And we are trying to see how we can scale that even more. It was 1,600 a couple of years ago. It's 2,000 now, but I would like to see this even more scaled multiple times over. And that's where, again, the resources that we're talking about that is in front of us can be leveraged to see how those things can be applied for manifestation of this talent at scale.
That's great. Thank you, Panch. Kaye, I've got a question for you in the chat. I work with low-income, diverse populations, and my husband is from one. I find that they get stuck and afraid to grow because they can't imagine what a better future looks like. Their talent gets trapped by their experience. What can I do to keep folks motivated as first-generation college students as they graduate from college? They often lack economic mentorship and support through this process. And Kaye, I know you and I have talked about if you don't have a safety net, a parental safety net, it's really hard to recommend somebody going into the sciences. What do you think of this?
It is, and I think the word that comes to mind, and even listening to the conversation just now, is a sense of connectedness. This is really framed nicely, and within the framing of this question, the word mentorship comes up. And that is necessary from the time somebody is recruited into the institution to when they're left and are going through and starting into their first, second, or third job, or into career changes. Sometimes we think, okay, just get somebody here, and people use the term pipeline, which I'm glad hasn't come up yet. I'm sorry that I was the one to put it on the table, but it's this sense that you're coming in, and as soon as you get here, all of a sudden everything else is figured out after that. That is obviously not true. So, in our institution here at Georgia Tech, at many institutions, they are really focused not only on bringing in students some of whom are first generation, but that mentoring that has to go on so that they progress to graduation, so that they understand what all of those capabilities are as they leave. I'd say the other part of this question that is really important is that the students understand their value and their worth, and we need to enable them to see it. So some of the partnerships that we're hearing about on this call, some of what Panch just talked about in the programs, we also need to have the human factor to make sure that there is an ushering through, and that a variety of pathways are available, not just what we typically think of when someone comes into a four-year institution and leaves. There's a lot more that I can answer to that, but I know we're running out of time, so I hand it back to you.
Thanks, Kaye. The amount of wisdom in this conversation has been just truly tremendous. And I know all of you are incredibly approachable. And I know that folks will reach out to you. You all have made an amazing case for this need to increase our investment in R&D, the federal investment, which will then lead to cascading effects throughout industry and academia. You've made that case very well. I can't tell this audience enough. The moment of opportunity is this next 4 months before the end of this year. Once that passes, if we can't get this legislation through Congress now, it doesn't just rewind next year and start again. This is a political process. Your moments come and then they go. The moment is now. And we as an enterprise, if we believe in this, if we care about this, this is the moment to act and to advocate for both funding and good policy that you've seen described today. I want to thank everyone for just such a terrific conversation, and turn it back to Donna.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sudip. And thank you to all of our panelists for this amazing discussion. Your passion, your commitment and dedication is truly inspiring. So thank you so very much. Now let's just take a very short break, and we're going to meet back in the auditorium for our next session, Innovation Amplified, ARPA-H. We'll see you at 2:40 Eastern Time. Thank you.